Thank you so much for having me here, for the organizers and everyone who is attending to this meeting or talk or sharing. And it's an interesting thing to create context for the first time in my life in a virtual space, because I usually talk to people in the presence of their existence. And so I'm gonna aim to connect with you spiritually and through your faces and through your, through your feedback, visual feedback and sound. And at the end, we'll have a time to share a little bit about the ideas I'm gonna present to you. And basically, I think it's important for me to introduce you to the ideas by creating a little bit of context of um, what are we talking about here, and what am I willing to share with you. And of course, everything that I will share with you will be based on my own experience of life and based on research that I've done, and my many relationships with so many people around the world, and my dear relationship with the creator, which I treasure as the foundation of my journey. And of course, as a scientist, when I wrote for the first time The Brain and Paradigm of Melchizedek as a master's thesis in cognitive neuroscience, that wasn't theology or philosophy. It was just hard cognitive neuroscience, a paradigm that tautologically, meaning as a matter of fact, axiomatically, without any further proofs, I decree the existence of the creator simply because there is no reason why we should reject it. I mean, if it does exist, it would be a great loss, so it would be bad business. So, I mean, from that point on, I expressed the need to the scientific community to be more open about what science is, from Sir Francis Bacon down to Popper, and what the scientific method really is about. And of course, science is more than just objective science, third person perspective. We have first person perspective, which is the science, the observations that we do in ourselves, like the meditation we have in the beginning. We have the many experiences we have in life. We have second person perspective science, which is the science that we do when we have a relationship with, me and you, or me and my mother. And so we kind of connect and share meaning together. And all that encompasses the work of science, not just, something out there that I'm measuring. And so, anyway, one of the most important things I wrote in that first thesis that I wrote was the distinction between spiritual values and behavioral values. And that's the foundation in which I want to spend maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and then from then on, explain you a little bit more of how that connects with science. And so we're going to have a little bit of storytelling. We're going to have a little bit of movie watching. We're going to have a little bit of science and different things. And I really wish you can enjoy a little bit of this journey, which I will put together to the best of my ability in 50 minutes, or now 45, because I've been talking for 5, and see if we can make some sense out of this conversation at the end, when everyone participates, which I think it's the most important part. But let's start with the presentation. So I'm going to go to a PowerPoint presentation that I've prepared for you. And well, actually, this PowerPoint presentation was prepared by one of my spiritual sisters, colleagues, and friends from life, Carrie Jackman. So let me see. Can you see that or not yet?
Hang on, just so we'll make you a host so you can share your screen now.
Oh, yeah. So I have to say share screen, share, but I have to go here and here. Okay, so now you should be able to see my screen. Do you?
Yes, we can see it now.
All right, wonderful. Okay, so let's go here. So this will be a talk about science, spiritual wisdom, and sovereignty. And of course, these are 3 subjects that can occupy each of them hours of my life, which I have talked about each of them. And in each of them, there is many areas that I need to talk. But tonight, I'm going to make a very concise synthesis about the connection between these 3. And so when you start to imagine your experience in life, and what is the body of ancient wisdom that you really treasure. It could be the teachings of Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. It could be, the revelations of Jesus. It could be the revelations of Buddha. It could be, the ideas of a grandmother who talked to you about love and about wisdom, and she gave you good advice. Anything that it's grounded on wisdom that's coming before you, okay? Of course, a grandmother would be more modern wisdom, but she could have been grounded in ancient wisdom. Like she could be, for example, the descendant of a Hindu person who is a guru. And so you have all this stream of ancient wisdom somehow, since you're a child, touching you, and you're not necessarily aware that this is coming from ancient times, but the words that are coming out of people and the spirit in which people are talking to you, it's embodying ancient wisdom. And so I want you to think in any way you can about ancient wisdom and its connection with science. Let's go through this side of the loop, through the left down side. I don't know how you see it, but okay, to the science of peace. And so ancient wisdom and science are connected. And basically the connection that I highlight is that ancient wisdom is giving us a way to find peace, inner peace, and to bring that into relationships and social harmony. It's our goal. It's to establish communities which can live in harmony and prosper and find more understanding of life. It's not just about freedom, because I always define freedom as a period of grace that the creator gives us, or life gives us. If you don't have a personal relationship with the creator, that's fine. But the source of freedom gives us a grace period so that we can grow spiritually. If we fail to do that, we lose our freedom. That's been the case of so many civilizations. So the point is, this ancient wisdom, it's showing us or telling us or pointing us in the direction where we can find this peace inside of us internally, and then share it with others, and then eventually create a community or a society or a planetary society that can reach that level of inner peace and social harmony. And of course, we haven't attained that at a global level. It's obvious when we look at the world and we try to relate to inner peace and social harmony in our own lives. Well, maybe some of us in some communities in the forest or somewhere in Hawaii have found some form of inner peace, but many people who live in Caracas, Venezuela, or in India, in some places, or in Africa, they're far away from have found social harmony. Maybe some exceptions, some individuals have founded families or small communities, but as a big collective, it's still a road travel. And so the question is, well, why is that? Why we haven't found inner peace and social harmony? And is there any way that science can support that which is subjective experience as inner peace, and in a way that show us the kind of environments we should immerse ourselves and avoid decisions which are counterproductive to our attainment of inner peace and social harmony? So that is something I'm going to touch today too. Then within the context of science, but I put psychology, in particular transpersonal psychology, in a different box than science, even though it's considered science and I acknowledge it's science, but I put it in a different box because transpersonal psychology is the branch of psychology which it came out of, let's say it came out of a box which was behaviorism, and which was the ideas of Freud, and it was touched by Carl Jung, but basically the exponent of that transpersonal psychology that I want to refer to, it's Abraham Maslow. Abraham Maslow talked about spiritual values, okay? He called it being values. And he mentioned very clearly that there was a crossroad for an individual that was touching internally, spiritually, places in consciousness beyond aesthetic values, above the pyramid of needs, of the basic needs which were covered. That person was touching other inner spaces. And there was a moment that the person had to decide whether he pursue or she pursue that in a way that was a relationship with the creator, or in a way that was more impersonal, just connecting with those values like love, wisdom, truth, unity within him or herself. And so I'm going to touch a little bit on that too. And then I'm going to go to perhaps I mean, the most important section here, which is personal revelation. This is your experience. You know, think about Lao Tzu, think about the prophets of old, think about your friends who report to you a very deep spiritual experience that it's so hard to put words to, much less, you know, mathematical equations or you know, put you as a subject of an experiment trying to measure your brainwaves, for example, to see if you're really in peace or not. I mean, there are things that maybe they're not measurable. But I want you to think in terms of you, your personal revelation. Where do you draw this inner peace and this harmony? And if you have memories of your life where you felt so good and you felt so peaceful that, you know, and other people noticed that and you were touching people and people were saying to you, man, I feel you're so peaceful today. Or I feel you're so peaceful all the time. I mean, many of you may be peaceful all the time. So this kind of source of revelation, it's very important to connect with, because everything that I'll say to you, it's like a movie or like a you know, Kelly Slater talking about surfing. You know, you can watch many videos of Kelly Slater surfing, but you will never learn how to surf by watching videos. You need to grab your surfboard, go into the ocean, paddle, and then experience surfing. Spiritual life is similar. So sometimes you just wish that somebody like Kelly Slater or somebody who knows how to surf relatively good could mentor you and take you surfing. So take you under his wing so that you can feel more safe and more comfortable in your first experience with the ocean, and that he will read very well your conditions, your boundaries, your you know, fears or worries, and put you in a situation that you can feel that your boundaries are stretched, but not too much that you're traumatized and you walk away from surfing. Most people who wanted to have a spiritual journey in life were traumatized when they just try to start to have a spiritual journey. And I'm talking to you about communities like the communities in South America. If you think that, you know, I mean, maybe in Asia is different, but in South America, many people think that Jesus is the only Son of God and he's God himself. I mean, and everyone else is a sinner. So if you really conceive yourself as a Jesus or a Jesus is, I mean, if you really conceive yourself outside of that belief in that box, and you say, well, I wanna be like you know, he was, or you know, and have this experience and be that, you know, that not that person himself, but that kind of presence in the world and that kind of um, 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 agent of wisdom and love. And so when you start to actually even articulate that possibility, you already have a resistance of a whole society about that. And so that's already traumatic. And if you try that, you know, you unconsciously, you may be given hard times for even trying or dare to try that. But this is not the case in India, for example. In India, there have been many avatars. There have been many people who can aspire to have a connection with Brahman and overcome Maya and so on. So personal revelation, very important. And then I want to come back to the center here, because without having a personal revelation and an understanding and a comprehension of who you are, it's very hard to articulate, if not impossible, your sovereignty, your personal sovereignty. It got to be grounded on who you are. That's what kings and queens did in the past. They said, God gave me the power to rule. I am the sovereign Lord of this land. Now, that's what the United States American Revolution and the French Revolution protested, but they protested in a, let's say, in a little bit below that, apart from the founding fathers and mothers. They say, no, we the people are given unalienable rights by God, and we're equal to kings when it comes to govern ourselves. But the foundation of government had to be peace, inner peace and social harmony. And the foundation of government had to be the balance of justice and mercy within oneself. There is no justice without mercy. You cannot judge a situation without being loved, because otherwise you become a tyrant. And basically, when we are parents, we become the king and queen in our homes. We don't put a democratic vote to at what time the kids go to bed. We just send them to bed at 7 until they grow up and they become enlightened enough to govern themselves and be healthy and never lose the plot. So we move somehow from monarchy to republic to self-government under God. See, there is a trajectory in life, even though it's not explicitly laid out for us in school. There is a trajectory where you're more of a little bit of a creature, trying to know yourself when you're a baby. Then, you start to talk, then you start to develop, then you suddenly have rules given by your kingdom, which is your parents' kingdom. And then you kind of rebel a little bit about that, because you start to see that there are inconsistencies between, what it's asked and what is done and so on. But rebellion doesn't lead to inner peace. See, that's the key. When you have a government which is tyrant or you're not agree with, and you rebel against this government, you are actually in two sides of the same coin. You're trapped in a conflict. Inner peace, it's something about stepping out of the conflict and saying, well, you're not my authority because you're not the creator. And I can't rebel against you to find inner peace and social harmony, because the rebel is in war, with the ruler. So that's not going to be conducive to inner peace. Okay, so then I want to put these elements together to see if we can somehow connect them today, and find where is the road to inner peace, social harmony, and wisdom. Okay, so I'm going to be very, very quick on this slide, okay? And this slide is basically for you to understand that everything I've done scientifically falls under system science and decision analysis, okay? And that's basically, you can refer to Rifa, Howard Rifa in Harvard, or in Stanford, Ronnie Howard. That's the decision analysis framework. And of course, in decision analysis, you have an area where you model your system. You try to understand the systems, the system that you're trying to solve in terms of decision making. And then with the input and output of your models and your experiences, you put your spiritual values or your inner values or your behavioral values or any kind of values you want into the systems modeling and the decision trees analysis. You set up a utility function, something that you're going to try to optimize or maximize, meaning it could be profit or it could be happiness, whatever your utility function is. And that utility function could have many, many variables. It could be hours surfing, hours with my girlfriend, meditation hours, the times I talk to God, how many trees I hug a year, how many trees I plant, how many times I help an elderly woman, how many actions of kindness I perform per month. For many people, their utility function is how many people I rob, how many people I kill. So that's the negative side of decision analysis. That can be used for good or for bad. There are criminals in the world who use this methodology to maximize their profit and their power. But we're willing to use all this framework to actually maximize our inner peace and social harmony and the power that we have to do good and to improve our well-being, personal well-being and social well-being. So when we apply these two things, and I separated these two sides, you can have in this paradigm of decision analysis and system thinking, people using all that paradigm to create monarchies and aristocracies which are geared to empire building, where an elite is authoritarian, elite or a dictator assumes government in a tyrannical form. And of course, this is exclusive. This is only for the people that manage this process on the top. And that can be done through capitalism or communism. It's irrelevant which ideology you're in. You can actually be tyrannical as a capitalist, or you can be a loving person as a capitalist. You can be tyrannical as a communist. You can be a loving person as a communist or a socialist. The point is that most of these paradigms, which are exclusive and tyrannical, are profit-based, are material, are reductionist, are degenerative, destructive, and particularly apply destructive intelligence, like methods of torture, methods of control, etc. Yeah. Now on the other side, you have integrative paradigms like Commonwealth and or people who want to come together and expand, or states or monarchies which were separated and created unions, or United States, like Europe or America or other places. And they can come in the form of benevolent monarchies, republics, or other family building benevolent forms of human government, like people living in the rainforest, the Yanomami tribes, or the Hopi Indians, who worship the Great Spirit, or the ancient Israelite nation, which went up and down between monarchies and self-government under God. These things are, wide open to exploration. And of course, these ones which are integrative can be and are value-based. They are spiritual. They integrate the spiritual life of an individual with the material needs of an individual. They're systemic. They try to create connections instead of separating to conquer or divide or just analyze. And they are regenerative, and they use constructive intelligence. Now, no matter what form of political structure and what form of science we do, these political structures in science are going to serve either paradigm 1 or paradigm 2. Now, that's a personal choice, isn't it? I mean, I wish everyone could choose for paradigm 1. That's what I'm committed to. And I, of course, am committed to live under God's government, which is in my soul. All the laws that are prescribed by the spirit of the law, when there is no precedent of law to make decisions in a courtroom. There is no precedent, you have to appeal to the spirit of the law. Well, why don't we appeal to the spirit of the law every single moment and connect with each other? See, in this conversation here, there is no president, there is no king. There is a group of people who agree to be together, who know how to govern themselves, and who are willing to spend a good time in community. And that can be extended from this virtual environment to our perhaps a new city that we will build one day, or many, many communities where we will share peace and social harmony. It's up to us. So I'm going to continue by sharing with you a little bit about universal values and behavioral values and the difference between that. And now I'm going to ask you to, okay, so now I'm going to slow down in my talk, because you notice I was giving you a lot of information, talking at a pace which is very hard to absorb. Yeah, and I'm aware of that, and that's fine, because I need to give you information. But on the other hand, I need to facilitate a process where you can connect to your soul and your heart. Yeah, and you can start to feel that what I've told you actually makes sense for you internally, because I'm sure the things that you've heard, you've pondered on, many of you, and you ponder about how to find freedom, how to find peace, and what is the difference between love or between truth and honesty. See, this is the difference between a spiritual value and a behavioral value. You can be honest in one culture, and that can be dishonest in another culture, but you cannot be truth, universal truth in one culture, and not be universal truth in another culture. Universal truth is truth. And so, okay, so with that, I want you to connect with two words, I am, or basically one phrase, I am, without qualifiers. Don't think I am a mother, I am a teacher, I am a student, I am a Jew, I am a Christian, I am a nation, I am none of that, no qualifiers, just I am. Every one of us can say, I am. And I'm gonna ask a friend of mine to read this while you gaze with your eyes, so that you can hear it. You can hear it with the sense of I am. So when you say I am universal values, this is who you are. This is not anymore a concept that you read on a board. Okay, so let's do that.
Universal values are the antidote to greed, fear, anger, guilt, misuse of power, and chaos in general, because they are grounded in connectedness. Universal values are an invisible yet apprehensible presence, essences and forces, which may beget noble human thoughts and feelings that are beneficial to the body, our mental, emotional, and physical well-being. Universal values are the foundation to constructive intelligence and altruistic actions for the well-being of the human family and beyond. To explore and embody universal values leads to the exploration of the source of all values, the value giver, an ultimate value in everlasting, never-changing presence. In our voluntary exploration of the laws of nature, the universe, the mind, and the attainment of a conscious, everlasting relationship with the ultimate value giver and the universe. Two categories of values can be identified from a human being's perspective: biological values and universal values. These two categories may be explored and realized in the context of their own domain and nature, and their synthesis may be attained in a human life with the emergence of a fully conscious human being who physically embodies and expresses continuously universal values. Human values are behavioural values, sometimes limiting and sometimes supporting of human expression. They are relative in meaning, power, goodness and beauty, mainly related to a biological, physical and objective reality and the way it affects an individual. It can be transformed by the agency of universal values. Universal values are spiritual values with or without the agency of a human or a behavioural component. They are always liberating and ever expanding our human consciousness. Absolute in meaning, power, goodness, beauty and truth, mainly related to our moral, spiritual and subjective nature. Normative values are based on a set of boundaries and behaviours developed through fair and reward conditioning. They are patterns of behaviour where individuals are entrained to react and feed back to an external source, separated from the source of universal values. They are held beliefs and thought processes. Universal values come straight from the universal source. They are directly sustained and accessible through the acknowledgement and relationship with the Father-Mother of all creation. They are spiritual values. They are beyond any mental boundary of social, cultural, racial, and religious behavior. They are beyond the behavioral values of honesty and respect, moral codes of conduct. One can be honest, yet not living in truth.
Right. So I hope you enjoyed the voice of Carrie. So we have this thing called consciousness, yeah? And we don't really know where it comes from. From a scientific perspective, we can think in terms of the Big Bang, the beginning of time and space and all that, yeah? And then, you know, all the millions of years that took for us to have a brain like this, you know, where we can actually think about the universe and think about consciously about the universe and make questions and explore the universe. And of course, we wonder, well, how this consciousness, which seemed to be out there without us when we only had subatomic particles, you know, and electrons and protons and, you know, all those kind of things just wiggling together, you know, and in a dense space, and they just expanded, exploded because they couldn't contain all this density. And suddenly, you know, that consciousness, which was out there without a brain, creates a brain or ends up in a brain, and then that consciousness gets into our brains, you know, and you wonder, well, how in the world that consciousness got in our brain, and if there is a paradise or a place, a spiritual place, how did that landed on the earth? You know, and of course, it hasn't landed for everybody, but many people have experienced the joy of peace and love and happiness and through a human life, which involves a brain, a nervous system, a heart, a respiratory system. And of course, you know, we wonder then, what is this book here? Well, in 1992, I was consulting banks and oil industries, as Edric was sharing with you. And I, with mathematical models, and a vision I had in '85 took me almost 10 years, I mean, maybe less, 6 years, to create mathematical models to show Venezuela how the whole country was going to collapse and go into bankruptcy. And of course, that took me to a very deep place in being to ask important questions that nobody could answer to me, no human being. And after a set of very meaningful events, I end up in New Zealand after a year living in Hawaii, and I walked the land, and after another set of meaningful experiences in New Zealand, walking all the country barefoot for 1 year, I'm led to Australia to write a book of revelation called Paradise Landing. This is published with my master's thesis in Otago University archives. And of course, that's the old translation in English that I made because I wrote it in Spanish, but it's there. So what is this revelation about? It was about values. You know, how am I love? How am I truth? How am I unity? How am I humor? And how am I means my identity. Instead of looking at my body and saying, oh, I'm this guy who looks like this with this nose, I say no. Instead of saying I'm blonde, I'm whatever the identity I put on myself in terms of biological processes or information processes, I understood my identity. I am as love. I am as light, truth. So those values were to be my identity and what I would embody as a human being. Okay, so then I will tell you a little story now. In this book, there is a value called I am the nature. And a friend of mine, together with 3 more people, were in Venezuela at the beaches on one of my visits there. And he asks me, well, how do you connect? How do you ask for the universe or for God to reveal to you something? And I said, well, you just talk to the universe, talk to the trees. I mean, talk to God, even if you cannot see it. Who cares? Just talk, ask a question. He says, well, I would like to learn about the mysteries of nature, he said. And I said, great. So let's read that value in that book, which is called I Am the Nature, which was about asking for the revelations of the mysteries of nature to happen. And after some hours, he said, well, okay, let's go now to the city. And we ended up, traveling through a national park towards the city from the beach. And then suddenly he spotted a wild bird on a tree. This is a wild bird that was on a tree, and he spotted it. And he said, oh my God, this is a guacharaca. Guacharaca is a very typical bird in Venezuela. He wanted to take a picture of that bird. So I said to him, you get your camera, I'm gonna talk to the bird. And he said, no, don't talk, it's a wild bird. Don't talk to the bird because you're gonna scare the bird. And I said, no, you do what you know how to do, which is taking pictures, and I do what I know how to do, which is talk to birds, amongst other things. So in that humorous moment, I started to talk to the bird. You can see me here, right here with my arms stretched, talking to the bird. And now the bird, which was looking towards who knows where, it's looking down to me, look. And it's starting to actually make noises like he's answering me back. Rah, 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 rah. It's a very big bird, like this big. And so I'm saying to the bird, hey, my friend Juan wants to take a picture of you. Are you okay with that? Or you like to be left alone? Rah, rah, rah. So I got, from my interaction with the bird, that the bird wanted to be photographed. So I said, Juan, bring your picture. You can photograph. So he took these 2 pictures where I was talking to the bird. And then I went to the other side of the street because his girlfriend tells me that there are little plums on the ground, so to pick them up. So I took my hat to fill them up with plums. And this bird flies to the other side of the street and steps in my head. You can see here in my mouth, there is a little plum that I've just taken, from the ground. But this bird now steps in my head. So I said to Juan, you can see that you can see how big this bird is. It's really big and heavy, and the claws are in my head. So I said to Juan, I really think this bird is posing for you. You come and take as many pictures as you want. I don't think it's gonna go anywhere. So Juan took a picture here. So after a while, I said to the bird, okay, get down because we need to go to the city and you cannot go there. It's better for you in nature. And so the bird didn't want to come down. So I put my head down and the bird stepped into my back. And I thought, oh, that's gonna be hard. And so this friend of mine, who is a lady, that's Juan, my friend, surfer from childhood. I mean, she was listening for a weekend about spiritual values, and one of the values was certainty. So I used to say to her, if you have certainty, nature will respond to you. And she said, and she tells me later that she remembered those words, and she extended her hand and said to the bird, come on, leave Joshua, we need to go now. And the bird just stepped out of my back and stand in her hand. You can see the bird standing in her other hand here. Okay, so here it is. You have a connectedness now with spirit, in the spirit of who I am, with nature, which is the physical, biological universe. This is a one story out of 1,000 that Kerry has recorded and witnessed to many of them. So I wanted to share with you a little bit of the story so that you understand that the journey is not about head stuff, trying to work out scientifically how the universe works. We have to have these experiences within ourselves and with nature. eventually to make sense of the universe. The universe, as much as it is intellectual, is experiential. And so in the brain of Melchizedek, which is the thesis here that I wrote and I published in 2009 at the University of Otago in New Zealand, that was about exactly that. How to connect the brain of a prophet or a prophetess, the brain of a bodhisattva, the brain of an enlightened human being, yeah, how to connect that with scientific research, how do we attain that, and how do we acknowledge that there are people out there that know how to connect with the larger universe and with the spirit of life way better than any scientist, or way better, and they're just simple mothers and fathers, they're really spiritual, and that they're not crazy, and that they're not ignorant, and that they're not superstitious, and that they know exactly what they're talking about, and who happens not to know what they're talking about, it's me or you, who are scientists trying to box that talk into a framework that can be operationalized to be measured. And there are things that simply cannot be measured. And so, well, I just went on to say, okay, there is love. Let's accept that tautologically. How would love and truth and certainty reflect in the science that we take on a human body? Heart rate variability, brain dynamics, EEG, or ECOG, or fMRIs, reports, subjective reports and psychology reports, quantum field theory. Is the brain, the perception of reality, modulated just by chemistry, or is there any possibility that fields and quantum fields and electromagnetic fields will modulate the brain? Could it be that you and I actually are going to interfere field-wise, not interfere in a bad sense, but that our fields are going to touch each other and create interference patterns that carry information both to you and me when we are in the presence of each other? Could it be that my mind is generating fields that are going to a noosphere, like Teilhard de Chardin spoke, or Rupert Sheldrake, through morphic resonance, or through any other kind of theory that could explain that we're actually connected beyond sound and sound vibrations that mean something in our brains, that we are connected at the level of semiosis through signals that are way, way more powerful in communicating to us the other and the universe than just the slow, variegated process of words separated by dots where the idea is in a sentence. I mean, come on. If I tell you the sentence of that experience with the bird, it's gonna be a limited sentence. If it's in black and white and you read it in a book, it's very different than if you are there presencing that moment, yeah? So that's the point. So of course, I'm not gonna touch on all that today, but I wanna tell you that all my research took me to every single one of these fields. And in every single one of these fields, I published papers about that. But the most important thing I'm upholding is that I'm publishing papers to appeal to the intellect of people who are missing on the journey of having a spiritual life. That's the point of the science. The point of the science is not to enlighten us spiritually. It's to enlighten us intellectually so that we have a framework of decision that we can say we can trust the process of life, and we can go for a journey to find out what's the source of love and truth and wisdom within ourselves. So of course, respiration has a lot to do with, you know, brain dynamics and heart dynamics. And we're going to see a little bit about psychophysiological coherence and how these three systems, oscillatory systems like the respiration, the brain, and the heart, are connected, and they are important for us to generate psychophysiological coherence and cognitive clarity. And so the part of the brain, okay, so I'm not gonna go apart from a very, very, you know, I'm gonna brush this out because this is not what I want to talk to you, but you need to know this. The brain needs to burn glucose energy in order to generate a process of activity that, the most important thing, it's not generating just information. The currency of the brain, according to Walter Freeman and myself and Robert Cosma and others, who are luminaries from Berkeley and mathematicians from Harvard and Memphis, we are convinced that the brain, it's not an information processor, certainly not a computer. That metaphor is misplaced. It's just out of place, and von Neumann knew that very, very well. Now, the thing is, the brain, it's a living organism, and that brain, it's there geared to create knowledge and meaning for intentional action and decision making. The brain is a kind of controller system, a control system that creates meaning. Meaning is the currency of the brain, not information. What you see out there has no meaning until the brain processes and creates meaning, and then you go, I need to do this. A tiger is coming at me, run. Or this is my grandmother, and you extend your arms and you hug her. Meaning and values are very connected. You cannot have values without meaning, and you cannot have meaning without values. You know, you value what means something to you, and it means something to you because you value it. So Walter Freeman, who was the luminary in neuroscience, systems neuroscience in Berkeley, whom I collaborated, was the person who coined all these brain field dynamics and the creation of knowledge and meaning. And of course, the neuron, it's not just a generator of spikes or action potentials here, it's also generating at the soma level dendritic currents, ionic currents. And these currents are the ones that when they go above threshold, they produce a new action potential. So really there is a feedback system which between pulses and waves or oscillations. It's not just like a neural network which creates spikes and suddenly we can digitize perception of reality by modeling perception only through neural networks that create pulses. That's not the brain. That's a computer, but not the brain. The brain needs these wavy patterns that create new action potential. So there is a feedback system between wave and pulses. That's called the pulse to wave to pulse conversion. Having said that, you know, I'm not going to lecture you on that, but an animal, you know, who is playing in the river, I mean, is generating waves that you could measure if you put an EEG. Of course, in the river, you cannot do that. But we have measured the brain waves in, Walter Freeman did in animals like rabbits 30 years ago, and then behaviorally seen the dog doing that, just swimming in the river, you know? And of course, I'm not gonna give you the whole movie because it's 4 minutes and I don't think I have enough time, but I'm gonna tell you, I'm gonna take you up to here, almost to the end of the movie, where you can see this clock here and this dog chasing a pebble. Look, the pebble, it's here. The dog listens to that pebble, turns and chases it. That's the game that my friend Nathan trained the dog to play. There is a clock running on your right hand of the screen here. That's the time it takes to listen, to ponder what that is, to make it meaningful, and to intend to chase the pebble. And this peak that you see here, it's a window second where the brain shifts and consumes energy to actually create meaning to play this game, all right? So you have these incredible peaks of energy that are there to create meaning. And since, we've done that research on animals and humans, and since our main interest is to study the study of peace and neurobiology of spiritual values, then the work of Walter Freeman became very, very crucial in terms of how the brain creates knowledge and meaning. And of course, that didn't stop in animals. We took it down to the level of the human. And here, you're seeing 3 participants in meditation. This is brain dynamics of 3 participants in meditation, yeah? In different modalities, meditation, doing mathematical exercises, and with the eyes open, looking at the environment. You can see how different these 3 participants are within themselves, but participant 1 is similar to participant 2. Participant 1 has way more activity when it's with open eyes than participant 3. So that means that this meditator has learned, how to be in alpha way better than this meditator. And this one, it's just a novice meditator. This person cannot help to put her brain dynamics in green. And this that you see here, every single square are 256 electrodes. Imagine 256 pixels beaming the frequency, the dominant frequency of that area of the brain. And green, of course, it's here, it's 10 hertz, it's alpha. So the question is, can we generate at will for as long as we feel like alpha waves or heart brain or heart rate variabilities of a certain kind? And the answer is yes. There are people who have mastered how to do that. So we don't have to go to the Himalayas for 10 years to master being a peaceful, stress reduction kind of masterful person. We can do that wherever we are with a biofeedback system. And so with these kind of biofeedback systems, we came to the heart and we understood that, the cosmos through the value field and the quantum field and the spiritual fields, it's interacting with us. And the heart, it's able to capture that. And when you're in meditation and you're free from stress, your heart looks in a certain way. It's got different frequencies than your heart rate variability when you're stressed. And so, okay, so we measure that, and we measure that in a study we conducted together with the HeartMath Institute, which was the leader of the study in 5 countries, in United Kingdom, United States, Saudi Arabia, Lithuania, and New Zealand. Here in New Zealand, we were 22 participants, all wearing a heart rate variability monitor for around 2 weeks, 24/7, only 1 hour. We took the monitor out and for washing our bodies and all that, and we even sleep with the monitor. So we monitored ourselves for 2 weeks, our heart rate variabilities in our community in different activities, some of the activities in meditation. So this movie I'm gonna play with you. You're gonna see here activity 1, meditation 3, whatever, sleep time, and you're gonna see how different the coherence ratio, which measures when it's high, it means people are really coherent and stress-free and cognitive, they're clear. And so you can see it. Watch the movie and see the community is sleeping now. This is at 9 in the morning, they're waking up, okay, so they're coming to a meditation. You saw the coherence of the group went up. Activity 1 is supposed to create coherence, but not as much as meditation. So it creates some coherence. Then, we go into a recess. People go back low, low coherence. These are the 22 participants here. Every square is 1 participant. So you can see the community meditation, the coherence of the group went up. Then but down again, activity 2, it's geared to create more coherence. It elevates a little bit, but not as much as meditation. And particularly not as much as the meditation we practice here at the embassy, which is a meditation, I will not explain today, but it's a meditation that integrates values. See, that's paradise landing meditation. You saw how high the community went up. We read values, we chant, and we silence. We do three types of processes within those times. And so, okay, so I'm telling you that this movie lasts as long as monitoring the community for 2 weeks. This movie is 2 weeks long, but accelerated, yeah? So we're not gonna see the 2 weeks of this community, but you can see, the second day, after 24 hours, day 2, again, wake up, sleep mode, you're very low coherence, you wake up and then suddenly, you start your day. And I mean, this is actually at night, everybody's sleeping. So in sleep time, your circadian rhythms go down. And so your coherence level are down. So, okay, so I'm gonna go a little bit farther than that. So that's in the morning. People are waking up, getting ready for meditation, okay? Now you're gonna see when meditation comes here, boom, you saw it, yeah? And so on. Okay, so that's only a simple single monitor that could go on the ear, but ours was a sophisticated one that go in the chest, measure straight in the heart. All right, I think that gives you a little idea of what I'm talking about. If you want to know more about, these kind of meditations, you can go psychophysiological coherence. I mean, or these kind of technologies, HeartMath Institute, you'll find detailed information there. And here we have published some information on that too, these studies. These are the links, and I can send you the links by request, whatever it's of your interest, I can send you links of the publication. And okay, so we have published on spiritual values also, on the area of the heart, on the area of the brain, respiration. And you have some titles here: Towards a Cognitive Neuroscience of Peace and Universal Values, a Systemic Approach for the Propagation of Peace, and so on. And on pragmatic information and intentionality, I would like to call Carrie to read us this because we have a few minutes left. I want you to connect with this reading because this is what we think about Walter Freeman's work, which was, he passed away in 2016, but I think it's important that you come across this, the work of this person.
It has been 16 years since Freeman and Nunes wrote their paper, Restoring to Cognition the Forgotten Primacy of Action, Intention, and Emotion, where they rightfully warned us about the limitations and dangers of cognitism, neocognitism, representationalism, and the damage that a reductionist, technocratic-based science did and would continue to do if it is left unchecked, to a more systemic approach geared to the understanding of mind, soul, intentionality, and value-based decision-making, with the potential for a better and more sound scientific paradigm of consciousness that includes the objective, subjective, complementary pair grounded in biology, and particularly the neurobiology of a rich inner spiritual life, conducive to inner peace, constructive creativity and intelligence, and social harmony.
And of course, that has its big repercussions in pregnancy, because a person who is in peace, a woman who is in peace and is pregnant, will shape the cognitive, the neurogenesis of the baby according to her own prefrontal cortex. So basically, the mother is the gate, biological gate, to a peaceful existence or to a very troubled existence. Doesn't mean that if the baby is born from a violent mother or a drug addict or alcoholic mother with a fetal alcohol syndrome, the baby cannot heal, but its life is much more difficult. So mothers in particularly are called to be peaceful, and particularly when they're pregnant, and before that to prepare and to purify from toxicity not just of substances, but of negativity and stress. Okay, so what the transpersonal psychology leads us to peak experiences and plateau experiences. These are moments that are heightened awareness, but the plateau experience is not just about the peak experiences. The plateau experiences, as explained by Maslow, were the mastery of the peak experience moments that were like addictive, little ice creams that I want to have a spiritual experience. That's nice and that's fine. But what about being a continuous embodiment of love? What about being the love of God in the world? What about being the expression of peace and light? That is a plateau experience. And Maslow explained that. When a human being has grown enough and developed his or her human potential enough to become the embodiment of universal values. And that means that our species could now evolve from Homo sapiens, that we evolved from another stage, to Homo pacem, from the men and women of knowledge to the men and women of peace. So that would be more likely the frontier and a possible singularity. And there is a book, a paper that it's just in a review process, but it's available in an archive. So that brings us back to sovereignty. So what's that got to do with sovereignty? Well, remember, I started with a little story about the beliefs in South America. If you're a sinner and you're told from baby that you're a sinner, then you cannot but be convinced after you grow up believing you're a sinner that you need somebody to control you and to govern you. Because obviously, if you're a sinner, you're going to sin, you're going to do something wrong. And so that means that you don't know how to govern yourself. Well, that was what Rome and Constantine told the people. While and until Jesus comes, I am the government, said Constantine and the Pope and Rome and all that. And of course, those governments were there on the basis that a human being cannot govern him or herself, cannot be a person like Jesus or Buddha. And so the overcoming of abusive government, it squares back to our spiritual identity and our capacity to become, every one of us, a holy person, a saint person, a person who is pure, not a a self-righteous person believing oneself to be more or less than anybody. No, I'm talking about a person who has developed to the point that you know how to govern yourself. And so from monarchy to republic to self-governance, there is a journey, and that journey goes through freedom. It passes through freedom, people having the rule of law and try to regulate behavior with the rule of law until we become all enlightened beings. But our north should be that kind of level of consciousness. And I am convinced that every single one of us, it's endowed by life and the creator to find that place of sovereignty and that place of government and that place of inner peace shared in social harmony with others. And this is basically my message to you today, to go for it, to really go for it and use everything available to you to grow to the point that you know, that you will know that you are a Buddha or a Jesus or a Jesus is or a mother, you know, the saintly mother of India or you know, whichever character you conceive to be your inspiration to achieve a saintly life or an enlightened life. Okay, so from now on, I think it's your time to make questions and well, have a talk.